Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Hey, dude, what's up? How you doing?
Hey, how you doing? I'm just checking. Is Sola Scriptura fall under the Protestant title?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Sola Scriptura is one of the 5 fundamental solas of Protestantism.
Okay, just checking because I don't want to go off topic. So
it's okay. No, yeah, you can talk about that.
Yeah, so I have quite an issue with those who disagree that Sola Scriptura Christians are not in fact Christians. Is that your stance?
Well, there's a generic usage of the word, quote, Christian, by which people see and recognize those people as Christians because they use that name. But in the proper sense, we believe that the Orthodox Church is the one true church. And so in another sense, I have to be very clear and emphatic that, properly speaking, no, believing in Sola Scriptura is a heresy.
Right. So would you say the Sola Scriptura Christian who is truly devoted and committed to serving Christ, from what they can best interpret from the scriptures, is in eternal danger?
Yeah.
So what is the basis for that, though, in scripture?
Well, first of all, it revolves on whether Sola Scriptura itself is true. And I've got many videos where I show that it's not, and I've got many essays, articles I've written.
I would argue that it does.
Okay, let's get to the first point. Let's start with the basics here. How do you know the canon of Scripture apart from tradition?
I would say that that's a theological question because God in His sovereignty has, from all eternity, decided how He's going to make sure His people know His Scripture.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're saying that, and that sounds good and all, but that ignores the historical reality of how the canon actually came to be. How did it come to be?
In history, we see that God used His people to inspire.
Who's His people?
Are we talking about the Old Testament or the New Testament?
No, I'm talking about the decision of the canon of Scripture.
Okay, the decision precisely. Well, let's start with the Old Testament. We know that the people of Israel.
No. Nobody's questioning that there are inspired texts. I agree with you that there's Old Testament and New Testament inspired texts. I want to know who decided the canon of Scripture for the Christians.
We would say, of course, God did.
When did God make this decision, and how did He make this decision in history?
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so in history, we see that the initially for the Old Testament, how that came about.
No. The canon of Scripture for the church. I'm not talking about the Old Testament. I'm not talking about the New Testament itself. I'm talking about who made the decision in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th centuries as to what the Bible is. Do you know anything about the history of the formation of Scripture? The canon.
Yeah. Well, I was getting
you just keep going to the Old Testament. I want to know about the history of the formation of the canon for the church. Tell me about that history.
Okay, so specifically the New Testament.
No, the whole Bible, dude. This right here that I got. Who made the decision as to what books go in this book?
Well, we see that the apostles themselves, their writings.
Nope. Who made the decision of the canon of Scripture? It's a basic historical question. You don't know anything about this history. You can't tell me one council that dealt with it, one church father that lists them.
Yeah, because I guess we're starting at 2 different points. You're starting with
you're not. Yeah, but I'm asking you specifically a question, and you're saying I don't want to answer that question. I want to talk about the Old Testament.
Well, no, because there's a larger context within which the canon was formed. So we see it as.
Then you should know about the history of it. So name one church father that lists a canon of Scripture.
Well, they don't have to list it in order for it to be inspired.
You're missing the point. You have no knowledge of the formation of the canon. This is a historical, factual question, and you just keep referring off to things that aren't relevant to it. Can you name what? Do you think that the formation of the canon? I'm not talking about the inspiration of the writers. I'm talking about the formation of the canon. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
What?
The list of books that were accepted and used.
Accepted by who?
Well, it depends which group you're talking about.
You tell me. You said accepted. The list accepted. Accepted by who?
Well, this is why I wanted to start off more so on the basis of what a Christian actually is before we get into the canon, because
right. So because you're not going to be able to answer this question, by who? Have you read any of the church fathers? Let's start there.
The apostolic fathers, yeah.
Do you think the apostolic fathers decided what the canon of scripture would be?
No, but when you read some of the apostolic fathers, what they do is they're quoting scripture.
Yeah, but they quote all kinds of things, and so what? They quote things that aren't scripture. So who made the decision of the canon of scripture?
I think that came about through the acceptance of the Christian communities throughout the first.
Who is the Christian? No, it's not. So you have no knowledge of this topic. So you're trying to debate on a topic that you have no knowledge of. So you understand that this isn't even an issue that's debated amongst Protestants or Catholics or Orthodox. This is a historical, factual question. And you could read Protestant, you could read evangelical, you could read Anglican, and you could read Catholic and Orthodox scholars that will tell you about the historical formation of the canon of Scripture. Do you know anything about this?
Let's just say that that's the case. Let's say that.
No, it's not a question of if it's the case. It is the case. Do you know anything about this topic?
Specifically of how exactly the New Testament.
No, anything about the history of the canon of Scripture, how it's formed for the church. It's a very simple question. Do you know anything about it?
Well, because I understand it as a theological question, not so much.
You keep saying this as a theological question. I'm asking you a historical question about church history, and you keep saying, well, that's a theological question. So do you know about the topic or not, dude?
Well, yeah. Well, what I'm saying is we're starting off at two different points. I think that's where the disagreement
is. Okay, so I'm asking you about this historic question.
Do I know specifically can I pull out
anything about it, bro? I'm not trying to be mean to you. It's like you're debating on topic. I'm just asking you simple questions.
Well, really, I just wanted to get down to the scripture itself. So how...
I'm asking you... No, but I don't think you have the right to the scriptures. That's my point. I don't think you have the right to read them or interpret them on your own. Because you didn't...
I said, okay, let's grant that the Orthodox position is true. Let's go to the scriptures. Can we do that?
No, because you don't even have the right canon of scripture, first and foremost. How are you gonna do that when you have the wrong Bible?
You have the King James Bible?
No, we have the Deuterocanon.
Okay, the original King James included some of the Deuterocanon.
Yeah, but they don't consider them canonical.
Well, yeah, because this is why it gets into which group do you fall under, and this is why.
Yeah, it's because you don't have the church, right? So the point is that the church has the authority to make the decision about the canon, and you don't have the church.
Okay, like I said, I'll grant you that, but
well, hold on. If you granted me that, then you granted my whole point. What do you mean?
Well, no, because there's scripture that.
Dude, I'm not granting that you know what the scriptures are. Because do you understand that this is an epistemically prior question? The question of who decides the canon is epistemically prior to the scriptures.
God is the ultimate
revealer
of.
Yeah, but that's avoiding the question because we can all agree that God is the ultimate decider of providentially what would happen, but he uses the church in history to make that decision. Do you not understand that? Do you understand that the formation of the canon took centuries in the church? What church is that?
Not necessarily.
Yes, it did. Necessarily. There's no scholar. Name one reputable scholar that denies this.
Well, what we know from what little I know about the transmission of the New Testament is the word.
Dude, it's not a question of the New Testament. Do you not understand? You're just referring back to things that are irrelevant to the historical question. When do you think the canon was formed? Let me ask you that way.
In the first century.
No, it was not. There is no list of the canon of scriptures in the first century. Name one church father or historical figure who lists the canon of scripture in the first century.
Well, who were the...
Name a father. Name a father that lists the canon of scripture in the first century. That's what you just said.
Well, no. So you're saying the scriptures don't come from the first century?
The canon, dude. Do you understand this is a different question?
I'm sorry. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the scripture comes from the first century. You're saying cite
the canon of scripture is not determined in the first century. That's a decision of the post-apostolic period that takes the church 600 years to make.
Okay, so God's inspired scriptures weren't known until the canon was officially.
The canon was not known. Again, dude, you don't get it, man. The church determines the canon in the 6th council.
So before then, what? Like, was no one confident in what the scriptures were?
No. Do you understand that not everybody even had the total, all the scriptures? So some churches might have had 3 of Paul's letters. They might have had 2 gospels.
Well, that's actually my point. Is because the message of the gospel wasn't entirely resting upon having a full correct canon. It was a message of salvation.
But do you understand that we can go read those people to know what message they had, and that they had oral tradition as well?
Well, that's why I wanted to go to the scriptures.
Dude, this is a pre-scriptural question, because it's the church that determined the canon of scripture. Do you not understand? This is a really simple point, man.
Well, I don't understand why you saying the church has to determine the canon of scripture like trumps my, well, let's go to the scripture then.
Because I don't grant that you have the right interpretation of the scriptures nor the right canon of scriptures.
Okay, let's say that I don't and you do. Can we go to the scriptures and you tell me
this
why
this makes the original point about your question about the church, that you can't divorce the Bible from the historic church that gave you the Bible. Paul says that the church is the pillar and ground of truth, not the written text.
Can you show me that scripture, please? I want to see that scripture.
It's Paul's letter to Timothy. The church is the pillar and ground of truth. 1 Timothy 3, I think.
Okay, let me pull that up.
So you don't even know that Paul said that?
Well, I know Paul said that all scripture is given by inspiration of God.
Yeah, nobody denies the inspiration of scripture, dude.
I'm sorry, tell me that scripture one more time, please.
It's 1 Timothy 3, I think it's 14, 15. The church, the pillar and ground of truth.
Okay, these things I write unto thee. So in verse 14, he's saying these things that I write unto thee, hoping to come unto thee shortly. But if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God. Right?
The church.
Which is the church of the living God. Yeah, no, yeah, but this is not saying...
It is saying it. What's the pillar and ground of truth? You would say the written text. This says the church.
No, but Paul doesn't contradict himself, right? So this can't mean that
it's you that misinterprets Paul. Of course Paul doesn't contradict himself.
Okay, so was he incorrect when he said that the scriptures were going to make the man of God complete for everything in his life?
Okay, does Paul mention prayer there? So I don't have to pray because the only thing that's necessary is the scriptures? Do you see how silly and childish this reading is?
No, because the scripture tells you to pray.
Yeah, and the scripture also tells you to listen to the church as the pillar and ground of truth and to listen to the oral teachings of the apostles.
Well, I actually, oral teaching, say that one more time. Can I have the scripture for that?
Yes, 2 Thessalonians. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be mean to you, dude, but like, this is really basic questions that if you had even, looked at other positions on this, right, you would know these things.
Well, because you don't let me get to my scriptures there. We can get to my scriptures right after.
You don't have scriptures. That's the point, right? The only reason I'm going to this is to just show you that what you think the scriptures teach, they don't teach.
Okay, sorry, what was the reference you said, 2 Thessalonians?
I'm going to it. I'm pulling it up
okay.
On the screen for everybody.
Okay, 2 Thessalonians, let's see.
2:15. Therefore, brethren, stand fast and hold to the traditions which were taught to you, whether by word or by our epistle.
Well, what translation are you using?
Come on, dude. I'm about to boot you if you're going to be like this. Man, it says very clearly, it doesn't matter which translation. The King James says the same thing. Okay? Paul says that you keep the oral and the written traditions, and that's a standing command to the church at Thessaloniki. Do you understand there's an Orthodox church still in Thessaloniki that does the very thing still to this day that Paul says there?
Well, see, my question to you would be, Jay, is how do we know what the exact oral traditions are?
Within the church, you will learn these things. And one example of how we know the oral traditions is the history of the formation of the canon. The church, in her history, in her apostolic succession, could say, hey, we know Matthew wrote this gospel because it's been handed down and it's traditionally seen as the Gospel of Matthew. And one thing they could look to was the lectionaries. You know what lectionaries are?
Yeah, that's the readings of, different churches of throughout the year that, they can refer to.
Right. Did you know that the lectionaries were a big part of how the church determined the canon of Scripture?
I would disagree.
That's a historical fact, dude. Name one scholar that disagrees. You're saying I disagree, and every Protestant, Catholic, Anglican scholar will tell you that the formation of the canon had a key aspect in terms of the lectionaries. What do you mean you disagree?
Well, I'm taking a more simplistic approach where I don't need to go outside of the scriptures to prove that it is.
Where does the scripture tell you the list of the books to go in the scripture?
Again, you don't like my answer, but I told you.
You didn't answer.
Three times that
you didn't answer.
Providence revealed His scripture to His people.
Do you see how silly that answer is? God in His providence in history.
Well,
did God shout from heaven to? In what century or what church father said God shouted down to me what the canon is? Where was that?
Something better. It's better than a church father or historical. Let's go to Psalms chapter 12.
Dude, you don't understand that the canon is prior to you citing the scriptures. How do you know that? How do you know that that's supposed to even be in there? Do you understand that other Protestants?
Because you concede that.
You can see that. That's your argument. You can see that. That's not an argument. That's a fallacy. Right? That's a fallacy, dude.
Okay, is Psalms a part of the scriptures?
I'm asking you how you know that.
Well, because it says it in Psalms. I'm going to it right now.
So anything that says that it's the scriptures is part of the scriptures. You see how silly that argument is? Come on, dude. Do you understand that? Do you understand that Martin Luther didn't think that certain New Testament books should be in there? How do you know he's wrong?
Well, we know that the scripture, the list of scriptures were produced by fallible men.
Oh, so it can be wrong. Okay, so the church isn't the providential way that God determined the canon of scripture.
Well, the reason why we know it can be wrong is because some people have the Apocrypha and some don't. So we know that
that doesn't mean that it's wrong because people disagree. How does that tell you what's wrong or right?
Well, this is why I say you have to look at it from a zoomed out perspective of God's providential plan and how He revealed.
Does God's providence use men in history?
Yes.
How do you know that Matthew is supposed to be in the scriptures, given the fact that Matthew doesn't identify its author?
Well, if you want a simple answer, simply because it's been accepted by all Christians.
No, it has not. No, it has not. You're begging the question. It's been accepted by the Orthodox Church of the first 1,000 years, but many heretics did not accept it, like Marcion. And Marcion said Marcion claimed to be a Christian. So you have no way to know Matthew is in the canon. You're just arbitrary. How are you not being arbitrary?
Well, because we know that Matthew.
You keep saying we know. Who?
Just believers, Christians.
Christians don't agree.
Everyone agrees that Matthew.
No, they don't. No, they don't. I just gave you an example of people that don't agree that claim to be Christians.
Okay, I agree and you agree.
I don't agree with you. So what? The fact that people agree has nothing to do with the truth or falsity of the position.
Okay, well, let me show you why I believe what I believe. Can we at least do that?
No, I want you to tell me. Go for it. I've been asking you. How do you know that Matthew, given the fact that it doesn't identify its author, should be in the canon of scriptures?
Okay, well, let me answer that question with scripture here in Psalm 12.
That's begging the question, dude.
No, I understand, but let me read the scripture.
You don't prior to scripture, the canon itself.
Well, if you're asking me, it comes down to my trust and faith that God would preserve.
Yeah, but you're just saying this, and it's divorced from reality and from history. So it's actually just trusting in your own mind. That's all it is. Because you just said that anybody could come along and conceivably disprove the canon of scripture. So I've been asking you, how do you know that Matthew, given the fact that it doesn't identify its author, should be in the canon of scriptures?
Okay, well, let me answer that question with scripture here in Psalm 12.
That's begging the question, dude.
No, I understand, but let me read the scripture.
You don't understand because it's begging the question to answer with scripture. Because I'm asking you a question prior to scripture, the canon itself.
Well, if you're asking me, it comes down to my trust and faith that God would preserve.
Yeah, but you're just saying this, and it's divorced from reality and from history. So it's actually just trusting in your own mind. That's all it is. Because you just said that anybody could come along and conceivably disprove the canon of Scripture. So you literally think that I could, like Luther or some other person.
I wouldn't let that happen. No.
What do you mean? You said it's a fallible collection.
Yeah, but we would never look back in history. Let's say,
dude, what are you talking about? Liberal higher critics do that all the time. There's 200 years of people doing that.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that now suddenly the Gospel of Matthew is void because some liberal scholar decides that it's not consistent with first century text.
Oh my gosh, dude, they do the same thing that you're doing. They operate on your presuppositions. I know you don't agree with them, but they say, hey, the church is a fallible group of men, and they could be wrong about the canon. Just like Martin Luther thought that Hebrews and Revelation shouldn't be in there. So, hey, who are you to say that I can't revise the canon? Let me put it this way. Let's say I've prayed a lot, dude, and I have determined through years of prayerful research that the New Testament is just the book of Jude. How are you going to tell me I'm wrong?
Well, because the book of Revelation, at the end of the book of Revelation, it says anyone who
you can't, oh my God, you can't cite the text because I'm asking a pretextual question. Do you not understand that?
I'm not sure
what you're
getting at.
You're citing the text, and I'm asking you a question prior to you even knowing what the texts are. You're just presupposing that that's in the canon. I'm asking you how you know the canon itself. You can't just cite the canon of Scripture.
I said, okay, well, let's use your canon, and I'll show you.
It's not. No, you're not in the Orthodox Church. You don't have right to use my canon. I'm asking you your position. We're not here. We're not dissecting my position. I have a basis to believe in the canon of Scripture because I believe in the tradition of the church. You don't, and yet
let me tell you why I believe.
I've given you an hour. I've given you not an hour. I've given you 30 minutes, and you haven't given an argument yet.
Okay, my apologies. Let me go ahead and get to the point. Psalms 12.
Dude,
6.
You can't cite the Bible. Do you understand that? Because I'm asking you a pre-epistemically prior question. Do you know what it means to say epistemically prior?
Epistemically prior. No, well, that's why I wanted to get down to the scripture. I don't know.
You can't cite the scripture because this question is about pre-scripture question.